Hello, everyone. Welcome to 2026 Readiness, Balancing AI Innovation with Trusted Data Governance. I'm excited to welcome you to our webinar today, where we have some amazing speakers who are going to talk to us about what we've learned this past year and what we're expecting to see in the upcoming year. I'd like to go ahead and start out by introducing our speakers. Nicola Askham, who's known as the Data Governance Coach. Nicola helps organizations understand and manage their data better. For over 2 decades, she's helped organizations reduce costs and efficiency. People tend to turn to her because their data is a mess and they need help unraveling it, or because they realize that new initiatives are failing because of poor data quality. So welcome, Nicola, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And also with us is David Woods, Senior Vice President of Global Services at Precisely. David has over 25 years of deep practical knowledge of information management strategy, data governance, and data leadership. And David is one of the industry's most recognized and sought after voices on bringing together business and technology stakeholders to deliver data solutions that are value-driven and sustainable. His valuable perspective on solving key data challenges is derived from experience both as an external consultant and an executive leader of data programs within a Fortune 500 organization. David uses his vision of what's possible with current technologies, as well as the awareness of what's practical from a business transformation and change management perspective to deliver measurable business value to organizations. So welcome, David. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. Always awesome to share ideas with Nicola.
All right. So I'm not going to take any further time on that. I want to jump right in and let our speakers have a chance to share their perspectives with you. So we're going to start out talking a little bit about 2025. So I'm going to just turn this over to Nicola and David and say, how have data governance, data quality, and AI adoption evolved over the past year? Nicola, do you want to start us out?
Yeah, well, I think it's been a really exciting year. I hope you agree, David. I think that everybody's really, really excited about AI because, let's face it, the opportunities and potential are incredibly exciting. But I think with that has come this just a big understanding that data governance and data quality have a huge part to play in it. I think there's been other exciting technologies in the past, and people have it doesn't matter what the poor data governance people are saying, that we don't know what that data is, we don't know if it's good enough. People have just kind of it's technology, it's nothing to do with the data. But I think that the early practice implementations and some of the AI horror stories have made people realize that the data actually is really key. And so I think that I'm seeing perhaps more organizations starting to data governance than ever before, and they're really wanting to do it for business value reasons rather than, quite often it's regulation that's been driving it. And I'm working with so many more organizations that are doing data governance because they've suddenly had their eyes opened. There's a lot of business value in doing it to support things like AI. Is that the same for you, David?
Yeah, I mean, and you're right. I mean, I don't know if you've seen our latest report, but we do an annual report, Trends and Insights report, LeBeau College at Drexel University, around data integrity and data governance. And this year, 71% of respondents said they have a formal data governance program in place. It was 60% just 2 years ago. So you're right. So it has formalized and it has getting more structured in almost every organization across the board. I would say, the big trends that I've seen this year are, kind of, Nicola, just to, what you said, it's really no longer a nice to have data governance, it's a must have. And the reason for that is some of this AI powered organizational muscle that's in place right now. So I would say, a couple things. One, from a tooling perspective, automation and AI-powered governance tools are more and more adopted and more in play, right? So organizations are looking at automation for governance around data discovery, metadata tagging, lineage, quality checks, access controls, and those things that we used to, Nicola, have to do pretty manually, right? We're not fully leaned in on that right now, but we're leveraging some of the tooling and the AI-powered tooling within governance specifically. And then organizationally, I think, some alternative governance models or adoptions or evolutions of governance models are being put into place as relates to data stewardship, right? So I'm seeing a lot of that reframed as AI readiness, stewardship, metadata stewardship, responsible use of data for more of the ethical use of AI and things like that. So I think there's a reframing going on organizationally and within roles and responsibilities as well. There's some of the big things that I've seen change in 2025.
I think that's really, really true. I think interesting you were saying about the ethics and things, because one of my clients only today sent me an email to say, can we talk about how do we teach our employees about data ethics? And this
Yeah.
is the data governance team that are doing that. And you're kind of thinking, I think everything's almost like coming together to create the perfect storm, but in a good way for us.
Right, exactly. And then, and that's because, like everything else, like the regulatory commissions are starting to catch up, right? So you kind of had this AI hype cycle and everybody was doing this innovation and data was a big part of it. And now we're in this kind of AI pivot, right? Where now it's part of these core business strategies. And when it becomes part of core business strategies, the regulatory organizations start to look at that a little bit more, right? And then all of the governance and that stuff starts to catch up, right? And I know, Nicola, you and I have talked about this EU AI Act, certainly big with a lot of customers that you work with, has been in place.
Yes.
Here in the states where I am, there's 32 of the 50 states right now have pending legislation around AI that all involves data and metadata, right? And I can tell you it's a little bit of insomnia and a little bit that I don't have a life outside of data, but I've actually looked through all 32 of those pending legislations. I don't understand all of them, but I can tell you not one of them is the same. Right. So what that means is that, for data stewards and organizations that you and I work with, there's so much complexity around what information and what metadata is important and how do we govern that data and ultimately contextually how we're going to use that data. And that's why, what we do as far as putting these frameworks in place for scale, for ethical use of information are going to be really, really important in 26 and beyond.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So any other things that you're seeing as big trends over the past year?
I think perhaps the one thing that I've noticed is that, I mean, you and I in previous editions of this have talked about like data mesh, and we were saying how that I think last year we were talking about how the term had disappeared, but I would say that data products have continued to ramp up.
100%.
And a lot of organizations who don't, even if you said data mesh, kind of look blankly at you, but tell you that they're creating data products.
Right, exactly.
And I think that's another big trend that I've seen.
Yeah, 100%. You and I have talked about this before. Like, really, it doesn't matter architectural strategy wise, data mesh, data fabric. At the core to success there is metadata, right? Metadata and metadata maturity is the core to that. And metadata maturity all comes down to governance. And really where I think, it's really kind of the trust in the data. And now that's just exacerbated now. And I think we can draft off that from a data quality, data governance perspective around kind of this AI hype cycle or the instantiation of AI into core business practices. I saw recently, I think Forbes had an article that came out that said 78% of businesses have AI embedded in at least one core business function that's operational, right? So that helps, right? Because that's kind of the hype that we need, just like it used to be back in the day, like SOX compliance. Okay, it's SOX related. We could get some data governance, data quality. Now we can draft on this kind of AI piece there. But what's important about this is really trust in business decisions, right? And I'll go back to kind of that data integrity trends and insights report, which I always find super valuable because it has a good cross-pollination of organizations. And Nicola, you and I have talked about this before. There's this kind of common stat out there that's used by a lot of organizations that say 33% and 1 in 3 business leaders don't trust their data to make decisions, right? Which is alarming, right? 33%. But it's even worse for AI. Only 12% of business leaders feel like their data is AI ready, right? And while that's challenging for a lot of organizations, that's a big opportunity for data governance and data quality professionals to come in and to say, okay, here's where we can kind of fill that gap. The reason you'll trust your data and we can't get to an agentic AI type model where we autonomously make decisions with that data, it's because we don't have the level of integrity we need, right? And we can help kind of evolve those programs in a very purposeful way. And that's where the money's being spent. Right. So, Gartner came out, or they haven't come out yet, but they come out with their annual CIO report where, one of the things I find most interesting is where are people spending money and where are they not spending money, right? Because, everybody will tell you what their priorities are. If you look at where they're spending money, that's where their priorities are, right? And all the CIOs, the top 2 areas are going to spend money on and increase spend on were on Gen AI and Agentic AI. right? So I look at that as a big opportunity for us to start to get some of these data governance programs in place and start to, expand and evolve those programs in a meaningful way, because they can be tied to, and they are core, at its core and foundationally tied to ethical use and effective use of AI.
Definitely.
No.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. So let's take a look at 2026. Like, what trends are you seeing? How does AI literacy work into that? And what do you see coming next year? Who wants to jump into that first?
Yeah, maybe I'll start on that one, Nicola, if you're okay.
Yeah.
Like I would say, so we talked a little bit about, automated data management, kind of leveraging AI and some of the tools. I really do see that becoming mainstream in 2026. So, and what I mean by that is, as organizations start to build for like autonomous or semi-autonomous AI systems, we're going to have the data to support that, right? So the way we catalog the data and we govern our data is going to have to be what I'll call agent-ready data, right? So right now it's really organized, and most of the metadata in organizations is organized around the way that data stewards, business users, and IT users consume that information and consume that data, right? And it generally follows a fairly standard model around data dictionaries, business glossaries, data standards, business rules, and some extensions of that up to some more like process or performance measurement characteristics and use cases. We're going to have to start to look at how we recraft that data so it's ready for these agents, right, to consume and consume in a meaningful way, right? And that's going to be a tweaking, I think, to get a little bit less around how individual personas and organizations would typically consume that information, but how the AI agents are going to consume that information and be able to do it effectively, reduce bias. And all that's going to come down to is, enhanced metadata and metadata maturity. And layered on top of that is what I talked about before, like the regulatory pressures for EU AI Act and all the pending legislations around the US states here are going to increase the level of metadata, and the integrity of the information is going to be required to actually drive those models. So I can get into some other ones, Nicola, but that's probably the biggest one I see, as I think that's really going to become mainstream, at least for progressive organizations. And our metadata and our governance structures need to be ready to tackle that.
Oh, definitely. And I think, yeah, as I say, I think you've got like the two different trends that you're saying there. We've got what you've already mentioned, the using AI to help us do data governance and things, but also I think it's driving data governance. And one thing that I've seen a bit of, and from conversations with my clients and other people, I'm really getting the impression that data governance teams are being asked to take on AI governance, or there's some friction that they're having to resolve between an AI governance team and a data governance team. And I think that's something that absolutely has to be addressed next year. It's something we've got to do. And from the people I've spoken to, I think perhaps having them done on the same team is a really good idea. It would be a really good practical approach to make sure that we're aligned. However, that comes with the problem that data governance teams are experts at data governance, not at AI governance.
Exactly.
But to be fair, I don't think that many people have a lot of expertise in AI governance. So I think there's some upskilling that needs to happen. And if it's not all being done on one team, I think there's some really important conversations that need to be had about aligning.
Yeah.
Because I think what we don't want to do is make it too hard for people to do AI.
Yep.
Because if we come up with, here's our 100-point checklist that you've got to do to keep the data governance and the AI governance team happy. People will work around us. They've done that for data governance for years, and now we're going to add even more on. Is it ethical to do this? Have we done this? Have we met these, 101 regulations that there's going to be before long around the world? Then we know what business users are like. They're going to say, no, we want the shiny thing and we want it now. So let's just work around them and then we'll go and fix it later. And they won't, and a mistake could be made. So I think we've got to have very simple, practical frameworks to get things perhaps piloted, and then almost like, and I like your using the word trust, I think is always a very good one.
Yeah.
Because if you say to people, is your data good enough? Somebody's told them it was, or it's on a report, so they think it is. But if you say, do you trust your data? It really makes people stop and think about it. And so, do you trust your data to make decisions? If your answer is no, which I love, from the report, no, probably not for an awful lot of people. And now you're actually, do you trust AI to use that same data to make the right decision? It's going to really scare people.
It really is. I mean, you brought up such a great point there. I mean, you and I talk to so many customers and so many, data governance professionals on a quarterly basis, weekly basis, daily basis, quite frankly. You bring up such a really good point, is that organizations, when they're trying to tackle how do I kind of blend this AI governance, they generally have looked towards existing governance constructs that they have in place or frameworks they have in place, like these data governance constructs. And I think it's a good place to start. I really do, right? But to your point, right, is that there's different personas that are involved, and they don't typically work together. And the way they're going to have to work together, they are having to work together with AI. So what I mean by that is, generally you've had these data governance frameworks that have had business users, IT users, and your data professionals, and sometimes kind of compliance in there as well. The extension of that for these AI use cases involves legal, it involves ethics, right? It involves HR to a large extent, right? And the operating model with those functions hasn't traditionally worked. And you can't just drop those functions into that existing framework, right? You have to expand that framework and to a certain extent loosen up that framework, right? So that we don't slow down progress, we don't slow down pacing, but we have the level of control that's in place. And I think it's a great point. People are going to start to figure that out in 2026, right? Because they've tried to leverage those frameworks, and it's like sometimes fitting a round peg in a square hole, right? And they're starting to understand that, hey, we need a bit of a different escalation path, a bit of a different operating model, and a bit of a different dialogue as we go through those governance framework to get these AI use cases into production. And the challenge now, and why this kind of really resonated with me when you said that, was early stages of kind of this AI governance where I'm going to govern my program, right? So what are the risk indicators and what are the kind of tools that we're going to approve, right? Copilot, ChatGPT, whatever those tools are going to be. Then good organizations said, okay, I have to extend that level of governance, not just beyond just what tools we can use, but down to the use cases and the AI models themselves, right? So I have to govern the use case, govern the AI model. And that was kind of okay. We could get kind of past that. But to really operationalize this at scale, you have to also govern the data that feeds those use cases and feeds those AI models, right? And that's where these governance frameworks and structures we put in place are really going to be pressure tested, right? And that's why that's going to be so important in 2026. The orgs that can do that well are going to be able to get these programs into production and at scale much faster, right? And no one's doing it right now, right? As you know, I mean, there's a lot of hype around this stuff, and you and I hear it every day, Nicola, but you and I have shared the fact that with all the hype, only 4% of AI projects have made it into production. 4%, right? And 85% of them fail, right? So Gartner tells us, right, and you and I kind of look at the Gartner stuff sometimes, that mid-2027, over half of business decisions are going to be augmented or automated by agentic AI. Yet here we are today, like not even a year and a half away from that, and only 4% have made it in production. So we've got to get the data right to be able to kind of meet that goal that Gartner says we're going to be at in 2027.
It's scary, isn't it?
It is scary, but it's a huge opportunity, right? It's a huge opportunity.
Absolutely. And I think, I think most of the data governance people I talk to are perhaps a little bit scared that they've got a part to play in the AI governance, but are also really, they're keen. They see this as perhaps the thing that's made data governance sound like the stick that we're going to beat people up with, and more about enabling things. And I think that's, I've had a couple of clients this year who've changed their team names from data governance to data enablement. Because that is what we've always been trying to do, is enable people to use their data better and deliver business value. So I wonder if actually, funny kind of way, if you put it together and it'd be data and AI enablement, you put it all together, and that's what we're doing, is enabling successful AI.
Right, exactly. Yeah, because governance, I mean, governance always has it's like, hey, don't do this, stop doing this, right? And the enablement piece does kind of change the paradigm and change the mindset there as well. So that's good. I haven't worked with a lot of customers that made that change, but I can see why that would be effective. So curious, as you and I continue to chat throughout the year about how culturally that's being adopted in organizations. But I think, to your point earlier, data products are and have become through 2025, and I think they'll even expand further in 2026, more important, right? And I think the federated or decentralized ownership of that is going to continue to expand. So I think, given that enablement mantra, I think is a much more effective way of putting that in place, especially for decentralized and federated users, right? That aren't part of a centralized core function that kind of like lives, breathes, and thinks about governance every day. It's really around how do I enable these data products for the organization to leverage them, operationalize them, and then ultimately what we're all trying to do, get business value out of them.
And I think that, the first person who said to me that they were doing it, I was thinking, this is interesting. And their feedback, and you're thinking, actually, I think this is good. Because, say governance puts us in the same box as legal and the risk teams who say, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Whereas actually we're trying to help people be successful. And, we want our AI projects to be successful. So if you let us help you. So I think, it helps that mindset shift in perhaps our stakeholders, the people that we need to work with us.
Yeah. And the other thing I was going to say before, I kind of got off and drafted off your point earlier around kind of the governance frameworks and the councils was, I think like data provenance to me is becoming more and more important. I'm hearing about that a lot. So tracking where the data comes from, how it's transformed, who used it, when. And I think that's a lot around modernization, right? So I saw a recent Deloitte report where it said that 84% of organizations are undergoing some sort of modernization effort right now. So almost everybody's modernizing, right? Whether that's digital transformation, supply chain automation, whether it's strategic revenue management automation, or it's cloud migrations, et cetera. But it all comes down to kind of the data that feeds them, right, at the end of the day, because without the data, particularly in our legacy systems, as we modernize, we're going to have gaps and bias in the information, right? So I think data provenance tends to kind of rise to the top for me a lot now. Data lineage, where it's transformed, making sure we're ensuring governance across those data pipelines. And I don't know about you, Nicola, but I had not heard a lot about that 2 years ago, even a year ago. I'm starting to hear that more and more right now, because I think people are getting to the point where as they do these modernization things, they really need to be able to trust that information.
No, I think that's a really good point, David. And I think, up until, I think you're probably right. This year, it was that kind of provenance, that knowing the data lineage was really only for regulated data. And, you would only do it on the data that you had to because the regulator said so. And nobody could really understand the value of it beforehand. Whereas, we know the same data goes all over the place, or, you might have more than one source of it. And if you don't know that, you can pick up the wrong source. So, and I'd not heard the data provenance term used, but I did know that a lot more people have been interested in the data lineage and the data flows. So, I like the data provenance. That actually is another nice phrase that I think helps people, instead of it being a data management jargon, it's something that business people can get their head around and go, I do want to know its provenance. I want to know that it's the right data.
Yeah. So the extension of that, so let's just kind of go to, and Julia, I feel like we're just taking a natural conversation. I hope we're not.
No, this is great.
But I love talking to Nicola because it just it generates this, such good IP kind of in my mind. But as we talk about, and you and I work with a lot of organizations that are all moving to some of these big tech partners, right? Like an AWS, a Databricks, a Snowflake, et cetera, right? And they all claim to and do have, a level of, I'll call it like light governance, like within, each of those applications and each of those platforms, et cetera. And, organizations that I work with often struggle, right, to understand the difference between, like, is that the level of governance and the capabilities that I need? Is that enough? Do I complement that? Do I augment that, et cetera? And I think, I hope at least in 2026, it's going to become a little bit more clear around, the application of governance, where it makes sense based on use cases, analytical, business process execution, et cetera. But I do find that there's still some ambiguity, and it's pretty opaque around like what governance capabilities do I leverage from what platforms, because all of them have this like a little bit of it now, it seems like. You finding that same thing?
Yeah, I was going to say, I've had quite a few conversations with people at events and things about that, where, somebody in the crowd in the group that we're talking to will suddenly say, oh, but you don't need it because, we've outsourced it to, AWS or whoever. And I'll be going, but you do. And they go, no, they do data governance. Again, yeah, but you need to know what data you've put there, because we've had several outages and problems this year, and goodness knows what's going to come next year. You need to know what data you're giving to these third parties. You have to do your own governance. You can't let them go, it's all right, don't worry about it, we've got you covered.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is, I've seen effective organizations have kind of flipped that and said, look, if you're responsible for the business outcomes, yes, I am. Well, you're responsible for the data that drives or provides those business outcomes, right? And if they start to think of it that way, right, it's like, hey, if you're responsible for the meal that I'm going to eat, you better be responsible for the ingredients to make sure that they're good as part of that meal, right? And from a governance perspective, we'll help protect that with expiration dates. We'll have the recipes on how they get mixed together, what needs to be stored cold, what can be left out on the shelf, et cetera. But you ultimately are accountable to make sure that I enjoy my meal. In worst case, I don't get sick, right? So, yeah.
I love that analogy. That's such a great one to try and get people to understand.
Right. Yeah. It's not, hey, I just put the eggs in. I didn't know if they're spoiled or not. Well, it kind of matters to me, right? Because I'm your customer at the end of the day. All right, Julie, hoping to get you
Absolutely.
two off track.
No, we're good. We're gonna do a bonus lightning round. But before we do our lightning round, I just want to remind the audience, you do have a Q&A box. So if you do have questions, go ahead and put them in. If we have time, we'll take them. Otherwise, we will get back with you and follow up on your question. So just a reminder on that. So this conversation's been great. So this is how our lightning round is going to work. So we've heard a lot already here about AI, right? But we want to think about AI in practice. Where is it a good use? Where maybe could it actually hurt or not be as beneficial? So I'm going to give you an application for AI, and I want you guys to comment briefly on whether that would be a good place. Is that a place where AI can help, or where is it a place where AI can hurt? So let's jump in. You guys ready?
Okay.
All right. All right, so the first one is writing data quality rules. Help or hurt? David?
Shall I go? Excuse me. No, David,
No,
you go.
go
Then.
ahead. Nicola,
I know
go
I
ahead.
am
All right. No,
Go.
go ahead.
Well, I think this is something it could help with. I'm really bad at SQL. I did my training years ago, and I passed the course with flying colours, and then I tried to do it in real life, and the DBAs rang up, and they were very rude about what I'd done to the data warehouse. I'd ground it to a standstill with my bad coding. So I'm really good at meeting you for the first time, and I meet Julie and I meet you, David, and I ask you for your business rules. How do you know your data's good enough? But you don't want me turning that into data quality rules, because that would be rubbish. And I think that causes problems, because that's the same is true for an awful lot of data governance people. We're much better at the business side of things. But then I'm begging and borrowing resource from other teams and trying to get them to prioritize doing this for me. And actually, I think AI, this no code data quality rules, is going to be a real change for everybody. It's a game changer. It's going to mean that I can get my business rules and toss it to the AI to write the code for me.
Yep. That's a great answer. So I know this is like a completely bad thing to do, but I'm going to say help and hurt, right? But I'll explain why it's help and hurt, right? Is that I do 100% agree with Nicola. I think it can automate the creation, and it's a low barrier of entry now to create business rules and data quality rules. The downside of that is not all those business rules are going to have the right level of context or even apply to that organization. And I'll give you kind of an example, right? So we know a large pharmaceutical company is a customer of ours. They're doing a lot of, they're doing a big digital transformation. As part of that, they're migrating a bunch of different operating companies onto a common platform, common processes, common data, common system architecture. And they would generally sit 6 to 8 weeks and go through these long workshops with organizations to drive out, to Nicola's point earlier, like what's good data look like, and drive out business rules and data quality rules to profile that data based on that. And they said it's exhausting, right? I'm bringing 40 business users in. It takes us 6 to 8 weeks. Last time we did this, we came up with 240 rules after 8 weeks, right? And he said, I'm not even sure they're all right. He's like, is there a way you can use AI to automate this? So we did statistical profiling of the data, looked at change log analysis, looked at probabilities, and came back in 3 hours, came back and provided them with 2,000 business rules. All 240 that they found, we also found, right? And we did it in 2 hours. We found another about 280 or so that were value added, that were gaps that the business users didn't identify, didn't articulate. But we had about 1,500 that really made no difference. So it was driving all kinds of relationships that really had no business context or no meaning. There were valid business rules, right? But essentially it said, it would be something like, it says that if Nicola didn't go to the moon today and David did not drive to Walmart today, then they're not going to be a webinar together. Like completely wrong stuff. It may be accurate, but it's not as a business context. So I think it's good and bad. I think you should absolutely leverage it. I think you have to have some human in the loop reviews, start to like get bias out of there and get more relevant context and train the models to be more relevant.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. All right, next one, detect patterns in data.
I've definitely got to let you go first on this one then, David. I jumped in last time.
100%. That is 100%. It can help detect the patterns. But to my point earlier, it's we still need to have human in the loop reviews to say, are those patterns relevant to us? Are they meaningful to us? But 100%, because that's where the value is. Tell me what I should be looking at and evaluating, and then let me have my expertise to actually go execute against that, right? So 100% there for me.
Yeah, and I tend to agree with you, David. It's a bit like it's automating the data profiling that we've been doing for years, but
Right.
instead of those really long feedback loops, we can get it to the business users really quickly for them to go, I don't care about that. Oh, now that one's really interesting. I want to know
Exactly.
more about that.
Awesome. All right, Nicola, I'm going to send this one to you. Write business definitions.
Ooh. So this is
Now,
an
I'm going to say it
interesting
again. Business definitions.
business definitions. So I think following on from what David's saying, I think it's something that can be useful if done correctly. And I think this isn't just human in the loop. I think the human has to be involved a bit more. So I think it can help you do the grunt work, help you understand perhaps a little bit of what you've got. But I think the thing that scares me about definitions is that people will go, oh, it's all right, AI's written on my definitions. And actually, I did have a client earlier in the year who said, I don't know why you're insisting on data stewards being in the business, because we don't need them to write the definitions. ChatGPT can. At which point I went, ah. So
Right.
I think there's this worry that we've got to use it correctly, I think is the right thing, and not we mustn't let our business users think that they now can opt out of it.
Yeah, it's like like a customer that says, well, line of business. Well, what does commercial mean? What does government mean? Right. And the ChatGPT can't know what it means to you, because you sometimes the people within the business, right, are arguing that they have different interpretations.
Well, exactly. That's the whole point of having business definitions, because we can't even agree in the business, let alone getting everybody else involved.
Right. I mean, what's an employee, right? Like, so I could have ChatGPT and I could have Copilot come in and give me a definition of an employee, but every organization says, well, does that include 1099s for me? Does that include subcontractors? Does that include people that are on restricted schedules or on long-term disability? Like, all those things matter to organizations, but it is a value, to Nicola's point, as a starting point, right? So, and quite frankly, it's good enough for a lot of the data, right? So if you look at something like a customer or a client, like most systems allow you to maintain about 300 or so attributes for a customer or a client. Most organizations I work with maintain probably about 130, 140 attributes. Only about 30 of those are really critical attributes, right? I can say the other 100 or so, let the systems go into great standard definitions, but I really need to look at my CDs or my critical data elements to say, is that definition in the right context? The way we interpret that, we're going to use that, and we're going to make decisions on that.
I like that, David. It's almost like before you write the definition, or allow anybody to help you write the definitions, work out what's critical first, so you focus the human efforts on the right things.
Exactly. Yep. Exactly.
All right. Automate the quote boring work.
Do you want me to take this one?
Yeah, you can go for it, David.
I would say 100% yes. 100% yes. If you're defining the boring work as the work that's not going to have a significant business process impact, analytical impact, financial impact, or compliance impact, right? And then you still have the human in the loop review for some of that stuff. So the repetitive type things where you've eliminated bias, you've proven out the model, and that could be data cleansing, it could be cataloging, it could be the lineage stuff, it could be your data observability, 100%. But be careful, it's not a silver bullet to do everything. You still need to have the human in the loop reviews for areas that are really going to impact your business.
Yeah, and I agree. It's kind of all the things we've been talking about as well. We don't need somebody to spend hours writing data quality rules, doing manual data profiling, and on top of all the things you've already said. It's just that we can't just ignore humans. They are really key to it all.
And where
Yeah.
would you guys categorize, like, writing a technical definition, if you're like writing a definition of the technical columns in a table or something like that?
I think it would be that one probably does still need humans, but probably less so.
Yep.
Because the context is in the database.
Yep.
And I think, you know, AI can look at that and understand it better. The context is not in a business user's head.
Yep. Data discovery, data lineage, data cataloging, technical definitions to a certain extent as you get down to the kind of business definitions that we talked about earlier. As you get into, and then even statistical business roles like statistical profiling, like completeness, correctness, all that type stuff, you know, that's fairly, and that's boring. That's repetitive stuff. It's stuff you would, you know, generally, you know, do while you're multitasking on something else, 100%, you know, in those areas. As you get to the more contextual business impacting stuff, it's a little bit rougher.
Awesome. Okay, last one is, I'm going to send it to Nicola first. Getting stakeholder buy-in.
I think that's a no. I think it could hurt because I always say, and I apologize to you both, you've heard me say it probably every year for the last few years, data governance is more about the people than the data. We have to change people's mindset about it. And I think it is only people that are going to influence other people. AI is not going to, because they're going to think AI or the agents, if we get more in agentic as well, it's going to do it all for us. We don't have to think about it. And I think that is dangerous. I think we still need our business stakeholders to understand what it is that their part of the business does, what data they use and produce.
Yeah. So I'll give you a different lens on that, and just to say yes, so we can contradict here. But my lens is I think we can get stakeholder buy-in by using AI as a medium to get them to care about the things we're doing from a data governance, data integrity perspective, right? Because, you know, the conversation, the why I would say you can leverage it or you can use it as a tool is that you can come in and say, hey, what I'm doing right now is going to get our data AI ready, right? Or it ensures our data is AI ready, or it ensures compliance with the regulations around AI. And that is a medium, because that's where they're spending money right now. That's what they want to progress. That's what we want to talk to the boards about. We're progressing in AI. If you can draft off of that, we can leverage it to get stakeholder alignment. But in and of itself, it's not an execution tool to get stakeholder alignment. I agree, Nicola.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that answer, David. That's great.
All right, thank you for playing along with the lightning round. So we're gonna have one final question, and then we're gonna take some audience questions. So first, what is the single most important mind shift data leaders need to make heading into 2026? Or what piece of advice you could give them?
Yeah,
what would you give?
For me, I think it's this. I think they need to think of AI and data and even just like, you know, business strategy and everything as all part of one big thing. I think they're so easy, you know, they like to chunk things up into blocks, and they've all got to be aligned and working with each other. And I think that's a really key thing. But I think it's this, but make it simple. Comes back to the same thing. If we come up with a really complicated way of trying to do this, it's not going to work. We've just got to be really simple and focused on what we do, and make sure that we are doing the right things, but in the least complex way possible.
Yeah, mine would be something that Nicola already said, which is it still comes down to people and talented skills. And like, I don't know how, you know, we've gotten to this point where we feel like artificial intelligence implies that humans aren't intelligent, right? Somehow, right? And because AI is enabling, automating, you know, or augmenting things that we do, it doesn't eliminate the need for us to uplift and skill our people. And talent and skills and change management are really, really important. And the organizations that are doing this well are investing in literacy, AI literacy, data literacy as part of the AI literacy talk track. Most organizations have some sort of kind of AI literacy program going on, whether it's just general acumen, it's a little bit of expertise. But good organizations are really also embedding kind of data literacy as part of that, the data that drives that. And I think like that's the most important lesson I would say is it's not a silver bullet not to train your people and invest in your people, particularly around the use of the data to drive those models.
I agree. And I've actually seen, I've helped some of my clients where I'm helping them do data literacy programs where, as we've been developing it, they can suddenly go, can you add some AI literacy in there?
Yeah.
Because I think people are, They're not understanding what you can use the basics, like your Copilot, your ChatGPT for, and what you shouldn't be using it for. People just get really excited. They're playing games with them outside of work and, you know, creating funny photos and images, and then they think they can come to work and, oh, this would be good, I'll just dump my client data in there and go, and then you suddenly realize that, you know, they've done the wrong thing.
Yeah, I mean, it could have big ramifications. So we have a big, large financial institution that has a customer service center in Columbus, Ohio, and they were really, really anxious to get one of these AI use cases out into production. They brought a third party come in, they did some evaluations, they grabbed some data sets, some metadata. It had bias in the data, it didn't have proper governance. And ultimately what they determined was, and this was an accurate determination, they determined that 80% of the customer service calls could be handled by an AI agent or a bot. Right now, they had about 40 people in that customer service center, and they went in and they made some decisions that they said, hey, great, let's get into production. And they essentially reduced that staff in that call center from 40 individuals down to 10 individuals based on the fact that AI could handle 80% of the calls. Right. What they failed to introduce from a metadata perspective was the type of call and the length of the time to resolve. So while true, 80% of those calls could be automated by AI, the average time to resolve was 3.8 seconds. The other 20% of the calls, the average time to resolve was 38 minutes, right? So if they put all that data together, then what they would have found was they can really just reduce the size of that staff by about 20%, not by 80%. And then they had to scramble over the next week or so, pull people back in from other departments that they moved to, et cetera, to handle that. So, good example, I think, Nicola, of, great, we want to get there, but it's only as good as the data and the governance structures that are in place to kind of get to that point.
Definitely. And I think we need more of those kind of stories to help people realize that AI is not just a silver bullet. You've got to have all the foundations in place, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys. I mean, if you can imagine it, we've already kind of gone through all our or most of our time here, but I want to say thank you to you guys for this great discussion and to the people who submitted questions in advance.
Yeah.
As well as those submitting them live. So we're going to try to take a few questions before we wrap up. The first one goes back to the beginning, and so it looks like this person is a data governance leader, and so their question is,
Correct.
When they do have the AI requirements coming at them, where should they start? If there hasn't been any organizational alignment so far, they're asking, how do they start? If nobody up above them is, asking that. Sounds like they might be a data governance manager. So let's just assume they are.
Yep. So Nicola, you can take this first, or I'll take this first.
And I think, and working with clients who've been in a very similar situation, I think AI governance is, we think data governance isn't mature as a discipline. AI governance is really only just beginning. There's no real definitive answer. And I think it's going to, from my experiences to date, and talking to some experts in the field or who are considered the current experts, I don't think there is ever going to be a definitive answer. The same way there's no standard approach for data governance, I think there's no standard approach for AI governance. You're going to have to do what's right for each use case. So I think if you're a data governance manager that's been asked to take on AI governance, I think you're going to have to kind of look at the use case and therefore work backwards, reverse engineer. What is it that we need this to be right? Because if it was a pure data governance thing, you'd say, what's the process that's using this data? Which is the most critical data for this process? And how do we know it's good enough to do that? And I think we almost need to do that for data for AI, but also add that AI, the other lens is are we legally and ethically allowed to use it for this? And then all about the biases. So it's almost like adding a few more questions. This is probably my very overly simplistic way of looking at it. And I don't think that's the be all and end all. It's a little bit more than that. But I think that would be a starting point. And I would definitely encourage people to, same as I do with data governance, you need to network with others in similar position and share experiences, because that's how we've evolved as a data governance community. And I think that's how the AI governance skills need to be shared, and people need to be supporting each other as they go through this process.
Yeah.
David, what about from an organizational perspective? Like if this is just kind of coming at them and there's no structure in place, what would you suggest they do?
Yeah, the cheat code is kind of what Nicola said, and that's at reverse engineering, right? Because when it comes at them, they're not going to have context on the data governance program, data governance professionals. It may be mature, maybe immature, maybe they have knowledge of it, maybe they don't. What they will have knowledge of, though, is how are you going to measure success, right? That ultimately comes down to some sort of a calculation that involves data, and you can reverse engineer that down to the data. How are you going to build your model? What data sets are you going to use? And you can reverse, you can build that down into the model. So you can use that as an opportunity then to take things that they care about, how we're going to measure success or performance, how we're going to execute against that, or what data sets we're going to use, and then get down to say, are we covered or are we not covered based on what you want to achieve, right? Now, organizationally, then how do we build this back up and get this into either an existing data governance construct or an expansion of that construct? And the expansion, that could be the catalyst or the inflection point, because then it says, hey, these have some HR implications, some legal implications, etc. We need to get their POV and then expand out that model, to Nicola's point earlier, to be like an AI data readiness council or whatever that's going to be. That's how I would leverage that kind of opportunity. But you have to kind of reverse engineer. I think you can't just jump right to the data point. It's too big of a bridge for business users to get to unless they've worked through that model before. Good question.
All right, great. So this says, how do you balance innovation speed with the slow, necessary work of compliance and governance?
Shall I dive in again? I mean, I think it's the that old adage, when's the best time to plant an oak tree? Well, like 200 years ago. And when's the next best time? Well, today, because you missed it. You missed your last opportunity. And I think the same with the data governance when it comes to AI is that we can't stifle innovation. It would have been better if we were really mature and had all of our data documented and monitored. And so even if it isn't quite good enough for AI now, we already know what it is, where it is, and we know its current quality standards. So we know it's very quick and easy to do something about it. It perhaps was never that important, and now it is, because it's a key field in a model. But we equally can't say, I'm sorry, Julie, you cannot proceed with your innovative idea for AI because our data's not good enough. So I think we've got to find this pragmatic approach and say, look, we need to start doing data governance. So if you haven't already got data governance in place, I think you need a very simple framework got in place really quickly. So you have the right stakeholders lined up, that we don't have all the answers. We don't have this all catalogued. We're not mature. But I know who my data owners are, my data stewards, and I know who to talk to, so I can get the right stakeholders involved as quickly as possible so that we can come up with a pragmatic solution and almost like be putting in our data governance framework incrementally as and when we need to.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, like in my career, and any good mentor, any good leader I've worked with, they've always been biased towards action. So I am biased towards action, biased towards innovation, and I would rather lean that way. But I'm also a fan of hide in plain sight. Right. And what I mean by that is, as long as you communicate, and comms are really, really important, just what Nicola said, like to the legal teams, to the compliance teams, et cetera. Hey, here's what we're trying to do. Here's why we're trying to be innovative and be fast, speed to market around that type stuff. But we have stewardship in place. We have a general framework in place. We're gonna govern and do data quality checks along the way. We'll keep you informed along the way. You'll get past that. What you can't do is try to innovate and then all of a sudden dump it on those broader teams and say, let's get into production tomorrow, right? Because then you're going to have all these things. So that's why, again, that literacy piece and that comms piece goes really, really fast. But governance has to be seen as an enabler to AI adoption and AI scale, not an inhibitor. And if we don't bias towards action and towards innovation, it's going to be seen as a blocker or inhibitor, and it's never going to become, complementary towards that. And it should be, quite frankly. We don't have to hide. It really should be an enabler if we do it right.
Definitely.
All right, I'm going to try to sneak in one more question. This one seems a little counterintuitive to me, but see what you guys think. With so much focus on AI, how do you keep core data quality investments from getting deprioritized?
Do you want to lead on this one, David? Since I jumped in on the last two.
I mean, the way you do that, and I've alluded to this as we've talked so far, is you essentially make them part of your AI readiness and your AI program strategies. You embed that layer as part of that. So, in some good organizations, I don't know how many names I can go into, right now, as part of the prioritization and approval process for AI and AI use cases, the data team there, and they have AI ambassadors within this organization, actually have some of the criteria that talks about data governance, data integrity, right? And the reason they do that, right, is that it's part of the framework to get a use case approved, which means that it drafts along with those use cases. Like that's the best way to do it, right? Because like I said, disproportionately people are going to spend on AI from an investment perspective in 2026, at least according to Gartner, and they're usually pretty right on those spend because it's a CIO survey, CTO survey, draft on that 100%, right? Because having anecdotally saying that's important and it's foundational, maybe get you some momentum, you have to bake it right in as part of that. It has to be like part and parcel. If you're going to do AI, you have to do data governance, data quality.
Yeah, I just 100% agree, David, because it's the mantra I've been going on about for years is nobody wants to do data governance.
No.
You might convince them they want to do data quality because that's a bit more, do you want good quality data? Well, yes, please,
Sure,
kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're balancing that up against, do I want good quality data or to achieve my priority, you're probably going to go for your priority. So the only way to ever get them done was to tie them to whatever your priorities were. Right. You're not going to sell data governance. And I think the same is true now. To get the data integrity, the data governance tied in with AI is to make them part of it, not before you do that, it's part of the whole thing.
Part of it, it's like putting the vegetables on your kid's plate to say, hey, you want to eat the cheesesteak, you want to eat the hamburger, you eat your vegetables, right? And now it's part of the plate, right? They know if they're having that, they're getting the vegetables.
Part of the plate.
Yeah.
Good analogy. Awesome. Well, I do need to cut it off here, but thank you guys. This has been an amazing conversation as always. So thank you both Nicola and David for your time. We really appreciate it. And thank you to the audience for your time and attention today. This session is being recorded. You will receive the recording after today's session. So thanks again and hope everyone has a great day.
Great. Thanks, Nicole.
Thank
Probably
you.
see you in an airport crossing each other sometime soon.
I'm sure.
Bye now.
All right.
Excellent. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.